You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today this is part one of a doubleheader that I'm doing today because I haven't really been able to stream this week. Work has been busy. So I'm doing two episodes today, and both of them are going to be preview episodes. The one you are watching right now is a preview of 49ers offense going up against the Panthers defense and how those two match up. And then later on today at night, I'll be doing a 49ers defense versus Panthers offense preview. So you're going to want to tune in to both of those to get a full look into this matchup for the 49ers this week. And before we get into anything, though, let's get into this week in 49ers history like we always do. Just give you a little tidbit of some 49ers history here. So on October 6th, 1985, Jerry Rice, who was a rookie that year in 1985, he scored his first NFL touchdown in the NFL. The 49ers ended up winning 38-17 against the Falcons in that one. And as you guys know, Jerry Rice went on to become the GOAT. I don't think it's really debatable if there's been another wide receiver as dominant as Jerry Rice. There isn't. So he's still the GOAT in my opinion, and not taking any arguments with that at this time. But now let's get into some 49ers news and how that's looking before this game. I know the 49ers are dealing with a few injuries, so let's look at all of those now. Eric Armstead, he is still being evaluated with his foot injury, and even an ankle injury kind of popped up. So that's not good. So now he's dealing with both of those things. And Juwan Jennings, last we heard, was that he wasn't even close to going in last week's game against the Rams, or should I say Monday's game against the Rams. So he hasn't practiced yet this week. So I don't know really don't know what to expect with Juwan Jennings. It looks like that knee is still flaring up for him, and he might just have to miss another week. But I know I started with some bad news, but I got to go on to some good news here for the defense. The practice windows for Jimmy Ward and Jason Verrett have been opened, and the team has 21 days to add them to the active roster. Kyle Shanahan said they could both play this week. That's crazy. The rich get richer. The 49ers defense have been doing just fine without those two. But obviously to have both of them available would be a huge boost to an already, really good defense. And so we'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, the 49ers have no rush. They don't need to rush them back. Like I said, they have a 21-day window, so pretty much 3 weeks to get them back into the swing of things. And, personally, seeing how good this defense has been, I wouldn't rush Jimmy Ward or Jason Verrett back. But if they want to get them out there just to start, maybe get a few snaps, get them back into, game speed, they certainly have that option as well. So that's good news on the defensive front. On the offense side of the ball, we have bad news there. Colton McKivitz, as we know, who was filling in at left tackle for Trent Williams, he suffered an MCL sprain against the Rams, and he will be out a while. So it's going to be the Jalen Moore show, and we'll talk about Jalen Moore and how he's going to be matching up against this Panthers defense, in particular Brian Burns in this one in a bit later in our show. And Juwan Jennings, he was day-to-day with an ankle injury, but he did return to full practice on Wednesday, which is a good sign that he should be available this Sunday. He'll be good to go against the Panthers. And the 49ers released Willie Snead. Remember, they had signed him last week to play. Well, not to play, but, they signed him to the 53-man roster ahead of the Rams game. He was released. They re-signed him to the practice squad. So Willie Snead, he's back in the fold on the practice squad. But while we're on the topic of 49ers receivers, let's jump in to this preview, shall we? So let's talk about the 49ers receivers first. I mean, First, let's talk about Debo Samuel. Okay, in Monday, week 4 against the Rams, he had his best game of this young season. He had 7 targets, 6 receptions, and 115 yards, as well as that touchdown, that 57-yard touchdown. Check this out. So I just said he had 115 yards, right? 106 of those came after contact. That's insane. That's just crazy to me. And of course, I think that long touchdown probably skewed that number, but still, I mean, that's incredible stuff. And I honestly think it's no coincidence that Debo Samuel a little more effective as a receiver in this game. As opposed to his wide back role, he had 2 carries for just 2 yards on Monday against the Rams. And I'm happy to see Debo reemerging as a receiving threat. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like defenses have kind of keyed in on Debo Samuel as a wide back. They know it's coming. They're well prepared for it. It's pretty obvious to see. The Rams certainly were prepared for it. They've been gashed by Debo Samuel many times. They got gashed again, but this time through the air. And with his yak ability, I mean, he's a pretty tough cover even as a receiver, and he still is able to, put together some great highlight reels. So Debo Samuel, hopefully, we continue to see him as a receiver. And I like some of the things that the 49ers did, right? They know that the Rams were expecting it. They put Debo Samuel in the backfield. And I don't know if you guys recall that one play where Kyle Juszczyk got a carry, and they had Debo and Jeff Wilson Jr. in the backfield on that same play. So using a little trickery, using the fact that, there's a lot of tension on Debo Samuel being in the backfield, they use that to their advantage and get other guys the ball. I like that. I hope they continue to do that. And of course, hope we see Debo Samuel put up good numbers once again this week as a receiving threat, like I said. So then we have Brandon Ayuk, who is still looking for a breakout game this season. Okay. It's kind of criminal how he just hasn't been able to get going. Week 1, the monsoon game. Week 2, I don't really know what happened in week 2, but week 3, going against the Broncos, he had the tough task of going up against Pat Surtain, who's awesome. And in week 4 against the Rams, I mean, he caught all 4 of his targets, but it was just 37 total yards. So again, still looking for that breakout. It's not so much that he isn't being targeted at all. Like I said, he was targeted 4 times, which you can definitely justify him wanting to target him more, right? I think he definitely should get a little more involvement. But yeah, the 49ers have to find some way to get him involved because he's a great playmaker. And, similar to Debo Samuel, he can get a lot of yards after the catch as well. This week, they're going to be going up against Panthers corners J.C. Horn and Dante Jackson. J.C. Horn, Panthers 2021 first-round pick, he's been really solid for them. And PFF has him ranked 7th out of 105 cornerbacks, just to tell you how good he's been thus far. He had his best performance in week 3 versus the Saints, in where he was targeted 3 times. He didn't allow any catches, and he also had an interception. He also had just two tackles, but also 2 pressures and 1 quarterback hit and 1 hurry. And quarterbacks are currently completing just 46.7% of their passes thrown in J.C. Horn's coverage. And he has allowed just 47 yards in 4 weeks. That's crazy. So, like I said, ranked 7th out of 105 corners. This is going to be another week where we might see Brandon Ayuk fade into the background with another matchup, unfortunately. It's going to be a tough challenge for him, and we'll just have to see if Ayuk can get open, which I'm sure he can, but 2, the other factor is, will Jimmy Garoppolo throw him the ball, right? That's the other big thing, and one that I most often lean towards, probably not. If this coverage is sticky enough, Jimmy Garoppolo probably won't look Ayuk's way, unfortunately. The other Panthers corner, Dante Jackson, he's allowed 3 catches on 4 targets in week 4 and in week 3, both. And in week 3, he gave up 62 yards versus the Saints. But like I said, J.C. Horn had his best day against the Saints. So the Saints look to target Dante Jackson. We could see something similar this week with the 49ers. In week 4, he allowed just 27 yards against the Cardinals, who throw it a ton. And he's missed the one interesting thing with Dante Jackson is that he's missed one tackle a game in all but one game this season, which is not super common for like a DB, right? But notable because a guy like Debo Samuel, who can make Jalen Ramsey look silly trying to tackle him, he's coming to town in Charlotte. And so Dante Jackson may be another victim of Debo Samuel in the open field in week 5. So something to keep an eye on there. I would love to see that. So hopefully we can see that happen. The other wide receiver, I mentioned him earlier today, talking about the injury news, Juwan Jennings. He practiced on Wednesday, so he should be good to go in this game. In the game against the Rams, he was targeted 4 times. He had 2 catches, but both of those catches were third down conversions, which is big. I mean, he continues to have that same role for this 49ers team. And it definitely pays off. I mean, if he wasn't available, I think the 49ers would definitely miss that aspect of his game, him being able to, convert on third downs, be clutch in those situations. And, the 49ers is going to have to look to him again, to be able to provide that because, the first 3 weeks of the season, they were pretty abysmal on third down. And honestly, they were better against the Rams, but they're still not great if you're looking at the entire season for third down efficiency. So definitely want to get a guy like Juwan Jennings more involved on those third downs, as well as some other guys. The wide receivers, as well as those corners that I mentioned, they'll also be going up against these safeties, right? These Panther safeties who are pretty solid. Xavier Woods, who is one of their better safeties. He's been day to day with a hamstring injury. He missed practice on Thursday, yesterday again. And earlier in the week, Matt Rule said they didn't know whether he could play versus the 49ers or not. And he is, as of today, Friday, he is officially listed as questionable for this game. Obviously, if Xavier Woods can be out there for the Panthers, that's a huge boost for them and their defense. But if he isn't, stock down on their secondary because Xavier Woods has been awesome. And as you guys may know, Jeremy Chin, who is their other free safety, he's been placed on IR as of last week. So, they're kind of shorthanded there already. And it was Sean Chandler who started at free safety for the Panthers last week, his first start of the season. And he had 2 tackles. He allowed 3 catches on 3 targets for just 14 yards in his coverage. But one of those was a touchdown. So, obviously Sean Chandler maybe just not as good as Jeremy Chin, obviously. So if Xavier Woods is out, it's obviously a big deal for the Panthers defense. So with the shorthanded secondary, this is a question I have. Will we finally, is this the week that we finally see George Kittle more involved? And maybe even Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I mentioned Brandon Ayuk as having that tough matchup against JC Horn, but, the 49ers line up their wide receivers all over the place, and they like to get them in different sides of the field always. So there is an opportunity for Brandon Ayuk to get open in this game to, get some mismatches going, and as well as George Kittle. So I think if Xavier Woods is out once again, like I would try some things. I would try to get those guys going. But while we're on the subject of George Kittle, right? I mean, he is so the talk about George Kittle being used so much as a blocker has been around 49ers fandom and 49ers Twitter for like over a year now. Like even this goes back to last season that people complain that, he's too good as a blocker. Why do we keep using him as a blocker? And the truth about that is that he doesn't block as much as you would think. He was blocked. He was actually against the Rams week 4. He blocked on just 11.1% of all passing snaps. And so his lack of involvement, I would say, is in part due to him drawing double coverage. He gets a lot of attention from the defense. And 2, Jimmy Garoppolo just not throwing it to him when he is open. I don't know if Jimmy just assumes at this point that he's always double covered and so just don't look his way. But there were some instances um, last week, and you could probably even go back to the other games this season where George Kittle is open. There's a window of him being open, and Jimmy Garoppolo just doesn't look his way or just doesn't throw it to him, doesn't wait for his route to develop, things like that. And Kyle Shanahan, he did kind of downplay Kittle's lack of involvement so far, which again, like, this has been a thing since last season, but he's finally getting the questions about George Kittle and his usage. But like I said, he downplayed it. So I'm not sure if we see anything change right away. I mean, it would have been nice to have that would have been touchdown against Jimmy, between Jimmy and Kittle, the one that, Kittle had stepped out of bounds. And, who knows? Maybe we're talking about his involvement differently this week. But the point is, I mean, he's a playmaker on this offense, and they have to utilize him, especially when you consider some of those slumps that this offense gets where they can't get anything going. You have to be able to try all of your receivers, all of your playmakers, and see what works, see what doesn't. And George Kittle just becomes somewhat of an afterthought, even to Jimmy Garoppolo, who, it seemed that was his favorite target much of the time. But I don't know, maybe Jimmy's just like trying not to throw an interception. And so, maybe just not trying to throw it in double coverage, even though he does sometimes. Moving forward to the 49ers running backs. Jeff Wilson Jr., he had a better showing versus the Rams, I thought. He had 18 carries for 74 yards for a 4.1 average per carry. And he also had a touchdown, which I liked that one. He looked fast on that one. And of course, the offensive line, credit to them for opening up, that big hole for him to run through. Interesting enough, he didn't have any receptions in this game. And the one thing of note with Jeff Wilson Jr. is that there doesn't seem to be anyone competing for his carries. There really isn't any timeshare between him and Tevin Coleman or Jordan Mason, while Mitchell and TDP have been out. So, I mean, that's, if you have him in a fantasy team, like, you love that. You love volume, right? And he, like I said, he hasn't been bad. So I think I'd rather see Jeff Wilson Jr. out there than Tevin Coleman. I would like to see Jordan Mason out there for sure. Yeah, I mean, Tevin Coleman, going back to him, he played just one snap on Monday versus the Rams, and it was on a passing play. It wasn't even on a running play. And Jordan Mason, he didn't have any snaps in that game. Des has a comment for us. He says, Kittle not used much, at least Juice getting involved more. Yeah, definitely. And last week in that game against the Rams, I know Juice had that one nice play, the pass to him along the right sideline that he took up for, pretty nice gain. But there was also that other play that a lot of people were pointing out where Juice was, wide open on the left side of the field, and Jimmy Garoppolo seemed to not even look his way. So yeah, it is nice that Juice is getting involved, and he's an afterthought for the defenses, right? Because opposing defenses aren't thinking, they're not focused on Kyle Juszczyk when he's, running a route. So yeah, it is nice to get Juice more involved. And yeah, I know everyone's pretty restless on George Kittle, and I don't care who gets the ball, honestly, unless they just make plays, unless they're moving the ball. That's all I care about. I don't care who's making the plays, just make them, But going back to the running backs, Jeff Wilson Jr., he's a clear-cut RB1 in this offense. And I really don't see that changing, and I do also want to point out that I think his success is predicated on the 49ers offensive line, which last week it looked pretty great, all things considered. And uh, the challenge that awaits them, of course, is the Panthers defensive line this week. So we'll just have to see how they do against the Panthers defensive line, and uh, hopefully Jeff Wilson Jr. will continue to have big lanes to run through, as the offensive line has been able to provide that for him. But yeah, I mean, it's a week to week challenge, especially given the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Trent Williams, out at left tackle, as well as Colton McKivitz. So that's the biggest talking point right now. The left side of this offensive line, no Trent Williams, no Colton McKivitz. And so Colton McKivitz got hurt during the Rams game, and it's second year Jalen Moore who has to finish the game. So do we see Jalen Moore at left tackle again? I think we do. And it's not even a think, we have to see him at this point because they don't really have any of the options. Well, we all remember what went down in the Broncos game, 49ers Broncos, a couple weeks ago when Trent Williams went down. Jalen Moore was the first one to go in, and he allowed 2 pressures, 1 quarterback hit, and 1 sack in 4 pass blocking snaps. That's bad. That's really bad. So like when I saw him go in last week against the Rams, I was worried. But he proved me wrong. He kept a clean sheet in 18 pass blocking snaps. The run game was still successful, and that's all great. And he definitely proved me wrong. This week though, he's going to be lining up against Brian Burns, who is by far a greater challenge than, I don't remember the name of the edge who McKivitz and Moore had to go up against last week. But if I recall from my preview episode from last week, I recall thinking, okay, this isn't a super tough matchup for Colton McKivitz. This week, however, for Jalen Moore, Brian Burns is kind of a nightmare matchup. I mean, he's one of their better players on that defensive line, very underrated edge rusher. Last week against the Arizona Cardinals, he had 3 total pressures, he had a sack, and he had 2 quarterback hurries. He also had 4 tackles and 4 stops against the Cardinals. This season, he has 20 total pressures, 3 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, and 14 total hurries. He is ranked 43rd of 108 edge rushers on PFF. And so again, this is going to be a challenge for Jalen Moore, and there really isn't another option for this 49ers team to go through if he ends up looking terrible. Like this is pretty much their 3rd string left tackle at this point, and we're just going to have to see how he does. We don't have any other choice. The good thing is, the one positive, silver linings, I guess, the 49ers are going to try to help him out. Obviously, they're not just going to leave him out in the cold because they know that he could be a liability. And also they know that this is going to be a tough matchup, right? And so similar to the way that they did against the Rams last week, I think the 49ers are going to want to try to line up their tight ends, line up Juszczyk on the left side of the line to help out Jalen Moore. They're going to maybe try to get some runs going to the right instead of the left, try to get some misdirection to get Burns out of position, all of that. They're going to bring out the bag of tricks to stop Brian Burns and help Jalen Moore out. The one positive is that Jalen Moore, he'll have some help right next to him, right, at all times, in Aaron Banks, who still has not allowed any sacks this season through 4 games. That's pretty impressive. Last week, Aaron Banks actually graded his lowest of the season. I don't know what that's about. Sometimes PFF grading is, not good, but PFF gave him a 44.7 overall grade, and Banks gave up 2 pressures, 2 hurries, same as week 1 on 18 less snaps. So that could be why. But look, Aaron Banks has continued to be one of the most consistent offensive linemen of this group, and it's been a nice surprise. He's been very impressive. So he'll need to block Brian Burns some in this one as well. And he'll also see, let's see, I think Urit Gross-Matos, who doesn't appear to be a huge challenge on paper. So that's a good thing for Aaron Banks. Gross-Matos, he has 5 total pressures, 6 total tackles through 4 weeks, and he doesn't have any sacks through 4 weeks. He has a 45.3 overall defense grade on PFF, and he's ranked 100th out of 108 from his position. So, probably I don't want to say worst guy on the Panthers defensive line, but yeah, I mean, this is the weak point on the Panthers defensive line, if there is any. It's Gross-Matos. And like I said, he'll be going up against Aaron Banks most of the day. And I expect he'll have another dominant, clean performance, no sacks again, which they need, right? They need that on the left side of the line. So good for Jalen Moore. He's going to have that help. And so that alleviates, I hope, some pressure for Moore. As well as some of the other help that I mentioned that I expect the 49ers to give him on that side of the line. Another guy who is probably going to see plenty of Gross-Matos is center Jake Brendel, who last week gave up just 1 pressure and 1 hurry, but he also committed a penalty. But then again, this shouldn't be a scary matchup for Brendel, but he'll probably, in addition to Gross-Matos, he'll also see Matt Ioannidis, he will prove to be a bigger challenge for Brendel. He is ranked 34th out of 124 interior defenders, and he had his best game of the season so far last week against the Cardinals, in which he had 5 pressures, 1 hit, 4 hurries, as well as 4 tackles, 2 of those being stops. And the other guy who's going to see a lot of Ioannidis is Spencer Burford. Burford also will see some Derek Brown. But the big question about Spencer Burford, do we see Spencer Burford or do we see Daniel Brunskill get his starting job back? That's one question going into this week. And I'm going to lean on the side of no, we don't see Daniel Brunskill. And I'll tell you why. So, I mean, to start the game versus the Rams, Spencer Burford, he did struggle a little bit versus Aaron Donald, and he left the game at some point against the Rams. And, Daniel Brunskill got a few series who replaced him at right guard, but Burford, he ended up going back in. So I don't know if it was just a rotation thing. Maybe they want to get Daniel Brunskill some snaps, get him back to game speed. I don't know what that was about, and I don't know if they'll continue to rotate them. But I still would expect Spencer Burford to continue to start. And you know what? I thought Burford did fine, all things considered. In the entirety of the whole game, like I said, he ended up struggling to start, but he finished just fine. I thought, given the fact he had to go up against Aaron Donald. He ended up giving up just 1 pressure and 1 hurry on 15 pass blocking snaps. He played 29 total snaps in that game. And so, like I said, I vote to keep Spencer Burford in. He's your future. He's a rookie, and he's learning on the fly. He won't be going up against Aaron Donald every week. So that's definitely a positive to, keep him in there and just let him learn, let him get better. I mean, I think you can feel good about Spencer Burford starting and being a solid guy on this line for not just this year, but possibly many years to come. So the one thing I'll point out, I mean, and no, should things go really south with Spencer Burford, should he just play terribly at any point, not just this week, but any following week, they'll have the option of Daniel Brunskill, always waiting in the wings. That's a pretty good bench right guard option, right, for the 49ers, should they need to break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. Brunskill, he played 21 snaps last week. On 13 pass blocking snaps, he gave up 1 pressure and 1 hurry of his own. So pretty much same as Spencer Burford, but he did play a few more snaps than Burford. He played 8 less snaps than Spencer Burford. So, actually, he kind of did a little bit worse than him, but we all know that Daniel Brunskill is an Aaron Donald killer, so we do have to give him some props for that. Now, I did mention Derek Brown. Derek Brown, he's going to be lining up against Spencer Burford quite a bit in this one. So let's talk about him really quickly from the Panthers side. He's currently ranked 13 out of 124 interior defenders. That's good. Just in case you guys need to know, he has 7 pressures, a quarterback hit, 6 hurries on the season, as well as 2 passes batted down at the line. Something of note, because I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo's passes are very susceptible to being batted down at the line. I don't know why, but something to keep an eye on. I think Derek Brown might get his hands on one this week. I hope I'm wrong, but just something to keep an eye on. And through 4 weeks, he also has 7 tackles, 5 stops this season. The Panthers, they have a really solid defensive line, so don't let the record fool you. This offense, they need to be able to execute. They need to be able to block and have themselves a good game, to keep Jimmy Garoppolo upright and comfortable, and for him to be able to execute the offense. Mike Mcglinchey, let's talk about Mike Mcglinchey, because people love to freak out over Mike Mcglinchey. Right? It's low-hanging fruit, I think. It's like when you're in school and you see one of the cool kids bullying someone and you start making fun of them too, and you don't even know why, but you saw one of the cool kids do it, so there must be a reason. That's how this whole Mike Mcglinchey sucks narrative has kind of started. But he's been solid. He's been solid this season. He's graded well every week on PFF this season. And against the Rams, he was more than solid. He was perfect. He had a completely clean sheet, and the only sack he's given up this season so far happened in that week 1 game, the monsoon game. You guys might all remember it. Yeah. But we're not going to talk about that, okay? We're talking about now, week 5. He'll see a bit of Ioannidis, as well as Marquise Haynes on those nickel downs, as well as Derek Brown, like I mentioned. Haynes, by the way, who's questionable for the game with a knee injury, he's kind of a middle of the pack edge rusher himself. So when he's in there on nickel downs, he's okay. He has 6 total pressures, 4 quarterback hits, 2 total hurries, and 0 sacks through 4 games. And he also has 7 total tackles. And let's talk about the man of the hour, Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, lastly, to end things here. So the 49ers, like I mentioned, they will try to help Jalen Moore to keep Brian Burns at bay. But Jimmy Garoppolo, he has to do something to help himself out as well, right? Just like he did against the Rams, he's going to need to get the ball out quickly. And hey, all things considered, I thought it was a good performance for Jimmy. We don't ask for much from him. We know what he can do. We know his limitations. So all of that considered, it was a good game by his standards. We just ask, don't screw it up, Jimmy. Don't throw any turnovers, things like that. He didn't have any turnovers against the Rams. So good game for Jimmy last week. So the one concern I have here is, does the offense go stagnant again? Does it start off hot and, fizzles out? Because after all, this is a road game on a short week for the 49ers. And I know the 49ers actually do have a good record on the road the last few years. But I don't know. This could be, it feels like a somewhat of a trap game. I hope it's not. The last time that the 49ers played the Panthers, they absolutely steamrolled them. And that was at Levi's. And it was that was a statement game, if I ever saw one, in that 2019 season. And you know what? I don't think they need another statement game. I know a lot of fans are going to be expecting a similar performance just because that's what we saw in 2019, but this is not the same team on both sides, right? This is not the same 49ers team. This is not the same Panthers team. And so, from the offensive side, because we're talking about the offense here, I think there is I have a fear. I have a fear that they are going to regress again this week, play down to their opponents, not be aggressive. But there's an opportunity as well to build on that momentum that they got from, beating the Rams like they did last week and being able to build on that offensive performance because it wasn't perfect. It was way better than what we had seen the week prior against the Broncos, but it was not perfect. And so, hopefully I wish that they can just build on it and look way better against the Panthers this week. But it won't be easy. But I have faith in this team, so I think it's going to be a good matchup. And let's just say, I can't wait. I can't wait to preview the 49ers defense in this one because I think it's going to be a lot of fun on that side of the ball. Like I said, this is part one of a doubleheader. So later tonight, I'm going to be doing my defense preview. So you guys make sure to tune in. It's scheduled on my channel already. So make sure you set an alarm, set a timer, set notifications on, whatever you got to do to remember that I'm going to be going on later on. We're going live later tonight to preview the defense, and that one should be a whole lot more fun. Just saying. All right, guys, I'm going to end it right here. Hope you guys have a good Friday, and I'll talk to you later today for part 2 of today's doubleheader preview episodes. All right, have a good one. Peace.